Hi everyone, you're home on Tools with James, and today I'm going to show you how to cut perfect circles in wood using a router and the Milescraft circle cutting jig. Let's go and take a closer look. Alright, let's have a bit of a look at this Milescraft circle cutting jig and what you get in the actual kit itself. So let's have a look on the bench here. Alright, so in the kit we get this turn lock base system. So this is for connecting to your router. And you'll see that it's got all, cutouts and guides there to connect to your router. So we've got that. We've got our large circle cutting jig. So just basically it's got a ruler on it. This thing that slides along that clips onto the pivot. So I'll give you a bit of a closer look at that in action when we get up to it. So that's for the large circles. Then we've got the small circle jig guide. So this is for obviously doing smaller circles from 13 inches down or 34 centimeters down if you like. We get the circle jig guide base plates. This is what the base plate from the router snaps into and goes onto either your small jig or your large jig. So we've got that. Interesting that this would come in the kit, but you get an offset base. We're not going to look at this too close today, but this is for doing cornicing and just you can hold on to it, put your router in it and go around your edges, just make it a bit more stable. We're not going to go into that one today, put that aside for now. You get some bushings, so you get, if you're using a large router, a 1/2 inch drive router, you get a bushing for that to make sure that your router bit is nice and straight in your router. You also get the 1/4 inch drive one, which is what I'll be using today with a smaller 1/4 inch drive router. We get a pivot point. I'll show you more about this and what it means. You also get a little countersunk screw to hold that pivot point down. And then we get our bushing jig, so this straightens up the bushing in the actual router, which I'll show you how that works as well. And then you get some assorted screws and bits and pieces to put the base onto your router. And then you get a router bit. So I'll show you the router bits that you got and we'll go into some detail on how these will work with this machine. So you've got one here which is a plunge bit. So this one will drive into the wood, downwards nice and, well, as it suggests, it'll plunge into the wood nice and clean. Depending on what wood you're using, for this job, I'll show you that you can also just use a straight cut bit like that. These are both Milescraft ones. They're both come in kits that I've bought, being the circle cutting jig, and the other one came with a template for writing letters and stuff like that. So that's what we get in the kit. The router that I'm using today is my little Milwaukee M18 cordless jobby, which is really cool. And I've got the plunge base on this. The plunge base isn't a necessity to do these circles, but certainly makes the job a little bit easier as well. But I'll show you that you can do it both ways. So that's what we're using. Let's go and jump into the setup so we can get cutting some circles. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is connect our router to the Milescraft base. Now, what you'll notice when you get this out of the packaging is you've got a whole bunch of different holes you can go in. And the Milescraft kit also says that if it doesn't quite line up with the base plate of your router, you can drill a hole in it as well to make it fit. So it's pretty easy, really. So we've got that. We want to join it to our router now. A couple of ways you can go here. I am using my smaller router today, and I am going to use the plunge base just to make it easier. Because when I'm cutting these circles, I'm going to do it in multiple passes. We're not going to cut the whole depth in one go. Plunge base will just make it easier to just go down bit by bit. You can use your stationary router base as well, but just know that each time you do a pass, you're going to have to lift it up, unlock it, adjust it a little bit deeper and go again. So not going to use that one today. We're going to use the plunge base because it's just a lot easier. All right, now for the actual installation itself, take your base off. I've already taken this one off. You'll typically have 4 screws in them. There'll be countersunk head. You don't need countersunk heads for this one because it'll sit below. So that makes it a little bit easier for you. But the way we go here is we're going to set it up and we're going to line it up with a couple of holes in the bottom of our router. Now, it suggests to get 3 in there. I'm going to shoot to get 3 in there. If I get 2, cool. I know it won't go anywhere because I've cut plenty of circles before. But we'll put this base plate on and then I'll show you how to align up the jig. Okay, so as you can see here, I've got a couple of screws in it for now, but what you want to do is not tighten them up fully. You want to keep the base plate a little bit loose because we need to make sure that our bit is completely centered in the middle of this. Now to assist us with this, we have this bushing system here, right? So you get this little guide here. Now this one slots into your router slot like so. So you can see him sitting in there. And then we take the bushing that we've got. In this case, I'm gonna use the bigger size bushing just to center it. And that goes over the top like so. All right. So you can see there now that bushing's in, it allows me to center it up. So now that I've got it nice and center, I can go and tighten up my base plate. And I know that my bit will be dead center in the middle of this base plate. So I'm gonna go and tighten it up. Okay, so now that we've got our base plate attached and we've got that bushing sitting in there nice and straight and level, and you should see a little bit of air around the whole thing, and it should be nice and loose in there. You've got it dead center. We can go ahead and take that bushing out. So it just turn clips, locks, and out she comes. So you can see in the base there, we are nice and centered. Now what you want to do is go ahead and put your router bit in. So I'm going to use the straight cut bit today. So what I want to do is go ahead and put this into the router. Now I want to do a couple of types of cuts. I'm going to do some groove cuts in this. My project that I'm making today, it's actually one of those picture frame type things that people put their heads through and take photos for Instagram. And it's for axe throwing lanes, so it's going to be like a big target for axe throwing. So that's what the project is. Now to do that, I actually want to cut out a complete circle, so I need to be able to get the depth. Now this shank bit will cut me through up to about 18 mil. I'm going to be using 15 mil ply today, so we'll be able to cut right the way through. If you want to go deeper and cut deeper materials, you can buy plenty of these plunge style bits that have a longer shank. You always sort of want to make sure that at least 2/3 of that shank is in your router. You start coming out any more than that, you run some risk of breaking your bit or the bit coming out and hurting yourself. So we're going to put this into the router, but we've got to account for the depth of this base that it actually clips into, right? And you actually can see it actually is quite deep. So what we want to do is I'm going to take my plunge router and I'll put it all the way in the down position, and I'll just put my little turret there all the way down. So I'm at maximum depth of my router, and then I can I'll put my bit in. And what I'll do is I'm just going to reference this onto this and make sure that my bit is going to go deep enough to cut through the material that I'm working with. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you back. Okay, so we've got our router bit in. As you can see, it's sitting in there right now. What we want to do is connect now our router on to our circle guide jig base. Now this here, I'll give you a bit of a close up. You'll see these arrows. So we've got one here, we've got one around here and another one. And then you've got this little locking system. It's hard to see here, but it will show you that it's got a lock on it and a little arrow, and this little thing here that slides in and out. Now, pretty easy. All you need to do is take this, you'll see the arrows on this one, you match them up with the arrows on this one, and we lock it in. One thing to be wary of when you are connecting a plunge router, however, is you've got this knob here that puts these rods here into the machine. Now if I go ahead and I put my plunge router there, that way, when I go to lower my router into the woodwork, the handles are going to hit these. So when you're using a plunge router, you want to make sure that you offset it like so. Now I've got it sitting in there roughly. You can see the two arrows here are lined up, and as I turn it, you hear that click. It's now locked in. So now we're attached. Now remember I spoke about that depth of the router bit and making sure I had enough. So this is where I'm going to check before I move forward. So we'll flip him over. Just angle this up a bit so you can see what I'm working with. I'm going to lower the plunge router all the way down. All right. And you can see that I have my router bit protruding through that base. And remember I said I wanted to cut through 15 mils of material. So if I take my square there, it's about 20 mil. I don't know how clear that is, but we're on 20 mil there. So we've got the depth, we're good, we're laugh. So let's put that back in position. So we're going to set that aside. That's all set up, ready to go. Okay, so the first jig I'm going to be using is a large circle jig. So it says it on the side there. It's pretty cool. You'll see it's got the measuring tapes either side, so you know exactly how big your circle is. So this one's pretty easy to use. You just take this end here, it just slides nicely into this base plate. when I can get it in nice and straight, like so, and just tighten him up, nip him up. So we're in there. I'm going to take this other end off and give you a bit of a look. All right, so this part here is what your pivot will attach to. All right, so you can see there that we've got this little circle guide there, and this here is very, very important. This is your pivot point. So this will go in the center of your piece of work, and then this will essentially attach over the top of it like so, and allow you to spin around and cut your circle. All right, so I'm going to start with a large jig. I'm going to put it all together. We'll get our piece of timber down, and then I'll show you making a cut. So let's go. Okay, so we've got our workpiece fastened down to the bench. So I'm using 15mm ply, 1.2 metres by 1.2 metres. Just underneath it, I've put some of this EVA foam mat because I am cutting all the way through. This is a great cheap alternative to a router cutting mat. It's grippy. I think this whole big sheet here cost me less than 10 bucks. It's pretty good value. So that goes underneath. I've got just a couple of G-clamps securing it to the bench so it won't move anywhere. And then all I've done is I've just taken a straight edge from one corner to the other in this direction and one corner to the other in this direction and got my center point. So it might be very difficult to see on camera there, but I've got an intersection line with the grey lead. This is where we want to take our pivot piece and our little screw that came with it, and we're going to put that pivot piece just right into the center where we have our grey lead lines. I'm going to go ahead and attach that. Okay, so we're attached in the center. Now, I'm not going to measure out this first circle. All I'm going for here is as big as I can get out of this piece of ply. So I'm going to attach my circle jig pivot, put it over in the middle, and then I'm just going to spin around and make sure that it's going to cut all the way around to what length I can get to. So I think come back in a little bit, back in a little bit. We should be able to get a nice big circle out of that, and we're clear obstructed. We're not going to hit any of our clamps, so we're pretty much right to move forward and make our first pass. Now, when you are cutting these circles, you want to bring the router down gradually and just make small passes. So for a 15mm sheet like this, I'm probably going to make 3 to 4 passes to cut right through. So the router as well. So the router cuts it spins in a clockwise direction. So I'm actually going to pull this circle and cut it in an anti-clockwise direction as well. So let's, without further ado, mucking around, let's jump in and make a first pass. So there's the first pass completed on the circle there. Now, you would have noticed that I was keeping my hand on the pivot point. I noticed when I was practicing with this initially that it does get a tendency, particularly on the large circles, it can get a tendency to sort of lift off a little bit. And the last thing you want to do is ruin your big workpiece because it pops out and makes your circle not perfectly circle. So keep a little bit of pressure on there, and just with one of the handles on the plunge router, pull it around and you'll get that nice circle. Let's go a little bit deeper and make this cut right through. So there we go, there's a perfect circle cut through it like butter, as you could see. Now, you could hook up dust extraction to this. I just found that with the you know, the circular motions that you're making, you can sort of bind yourself up on vacuum cleaners, and you might have a great shop that you've got overhead vac systems in. So I am going to give it a bit of a vacuum up before I cut the next circle. But extremely satisfying, and as you can see, got the result. Now what I want to do, because I'm making an axe throwing target, is I've got these LED strip lights that I'm going to run in the outside. So I'm actually going to cut a groove right close to the edge. I'm going to cut it 6mm deep, and this is going to have an LED track light run through it. And then I'm going to space apart just some grooves to look sort of like a target. I'm just going to space some grooves out sort of 6 centimeters apart all the way through, and we're going to cut our hole out of the middle. And I'll show you how to do that with a smaller circle jig. So let's go build laps and do some of these grooves, and I'll show you how that all works. Okay, we're looking pretty good, happy with that. I've got my deeper channel around the outside where I'm going to run my LED light at later. And then I've done my groove cuts, so I just picked depth on my depth stop on the router guide, and I've stepped in to make my targets. But now what we want to do is we want to cut out the hole in the middle where people will put their heads to get the photo taken, etc. This is where the small circle jig will come into effect, and basically this one will pick up where the large one leaves off. So you can run your guide all the way down, right the way through, and this is where this one will pick up. However, the pivot point on this one is a little different. So where we use this one here, and we've screwed it in, we need to unscrew him now. So out you go. All right, we need to get our little screw out of the middle. Like so. Just put that aside, not lose it. And then you'll see on this small circle jig, there is a countersunk screw hole in the base of that. So that is now what we're going to put our screw through and attach to the same spot in our piece of work that we had, and then we can work our smaller circle jig. So I'll get that into position in the exact same spot where I just took the large circle jig guide out of. All right, and you don't want to over tighten it because you need to be able to pivot on it, right? So you can see there I've gone a little bit too tight. So I'm just going to back it off just a smidge, and now it spins nice and freely. So this one's good. You don't have to hold this one in the middle like I did with the other one, because it's actually fixed with that screw. So that's really good. Then it's the same principle. We just push into place our guide all the way across, and now we can cut smaller circles. And this one here, you can loosen off in the center, and we can bring him across like so. And now we can cut nice tight circles, basically from nothing all the way in. So I'm going to cut this one right the way through. Let's make that cut, build laps, and then I'll come back and we'll wrap up. And there you have it, perfect circles. And our axe throwing lane selfie board has come along beautifully. So just a bit of a sand, bit of a paint, and some LED lights in it, and that should be looking $1 million. I look for $80 for the Milescraft jig. That's what I paid for it, Australian. You know, could certainly make a jig up myself at home, but for the results I got from this, well worth the buy. Works great with the cordless router, as you saw. You can use your bigger router as well and cut heavy materials, however you want to do it. But I think for value for money, a very good kit, and I'm glad I bought one. I am going to leave the video there. I hope you found it informative, and if there's any comments or you want to know some more about the jigs or the router, certainly drop them in the comments. Always love the suggestions down there. But I really do hope you enjoyed watching the video. If you did, smash that like button, sub to the channel. There's always more projects over there. I do some tool reviews. But you've been Home on Talk with James. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.